A new book titled Tinderbox, an oral history of HBO, and goes inside the merger between Time Warner and AT&T and its troubled transition, ultimately leading to Warner Media's spinoff of that. It's going to create a new media giant with Discovery. That deal expected to close in the first quarter of next year. We're now joined by two very special guests, former Time Warner chairman and CEO Jeff Bewkes and the author of the book, James Andrew Miller. Good morning to both of you. It's great to see you. I have so many questions. And Jeff, I want to start with you because what's fascinating about this book is just the number of recriminations on all sides about this transaction. You described what AT&T ultimately did with the deal to be malpractice. And so I'd ask whether ultimately you regret selling them the company.
We had to make a merger with somebody. Basically, we needed to get HBO was already like Netflix. It already had VOD. You could binge The Sopranos 10 years before Netflix streaming. But what you couldn't do was watch Friends on NBC. You couldn't watch The Office on NBC or USA. And we needed to get addressability so you could watch your favorite shows on the networks that you are used to seeing them on. And it was moving over to these digital companies. So we needed a platform, whether it was Amazon or an alliance with Disney or something with Apple, where all the networks on the cable dial could come alive in your living room. And when we saw that wasn't happening, we looked for some company that could give us direct consumer capabilities like Netflix had, like Amazon had. And we ended up with AT&T. We thought that what they would do is take their 125 million customer relationships and their big consumer data platform and help us use it to enliven the advertising on CNN and TNT and TBS and give us some subscriber information for HBO subscriptions. But that didn't happen. There was a fairly revealing quote from the AT&T chief in the book that said if you pay a premium for a merger, you need to disrupt the company that you bought. We thought the reason for the merger was to activate this ad platform and consumer platform for HBO and Turner. We didn't think it was for AT&T to try to manage the Time Warner networks better. In fact, because they didn't have networks or studios, we thought they'd leave our people to help guide them in that process. And instead, they basically went ahead with trying to replace our management with theirs. I don't think it turned out as well as the street and we had hoped.
You described it, though, as malpractice, what they did to the company.
Well, I mean, you read the book because you can't, you take these words out of context and they become kind of provocative. It's a little more complicated than that. They did have a challenging path. But I think that the market is the best judge of it. And if you look at where they are and their decision that the course they were on wasn't working, I think that's the best way to judge what has happened.
Hey, James, it's a remarkable book, and you spoke to so many different people and really go through the history of HBO, which unto itself is fascinating. And by the way, in full disclosure, I should say that they made Too Big to Fail many years ago, and I'm developing something with them now. But the question I'd ask you is, John Stankey and Randall Stephenson have said repeatedly that this has still been a successful deal. Do you think that stands up?
Well, look, I mean, one of the things that it was important to mention is that HBO, there's never been a stock called HBO, right? So throughout its entire 49-year-old history, there's always been a parent company. And there's been a series of mergers and acquisitions that have taken place. The AT&T deal, look, if it's very, very successful, I'm not sure they answer the phone then when David Zaslav and John Malone call. I think that vertical integration turned out to be much harder than they thought. And I think John Stankey admits that in the book. And I think the market didn't give them the premium that they thought they would have after this acquisition.